Daniel Ricciardo did so well in Red Bull and somewhat Renault, but in McLaren, he just couldn't pull it together. The car doesn't suit his driving style. It's quite similar to that of executives as well. They might have done very well in that other company because of how that company runs, all the instruments that are available to them. But in your company, you might not have that. So just because they have done very well in the past, it's not that they'll do very well over here. And even if they could, it's taking so much energy out of them, they're hating themselves as well.
Welcome, Ashik. Great to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to this one, man.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to take you back to your early days and really want to get your story, Ashik. Just how did you co-found Dippity? How did that all come about?
There's a good old Jeff Bezos saying is that you don't choose, your passion chooses you. And I think growing up, I didn't actually have anything about becoming an entrepreneur myself. Matter of fact, I'm not born in Australia. I was born in Bangladesh. And in my mother tongue, Bengali, there is no direct translation for the word entrepreneur. Okay. So it wasn't like when you grow up, what are you going to be in this exercise you did in primary school? I did not have being an entrepreneur or businessman or anything. And that wasn't not at all what I was planning to do. What happened was I used to work for my co-founder. He had a very labor intensive business in the aviation industry. What Deputy is today is something that I solved for him in his business. And it made a massive difference to the business and his life as well. And as I was leading that business, he tapped me on the shoulders. All my other friends who are still running that one restaurant or that one bar or hairdresser or one shop, they're still struggling. And they asked me, hey, from a small business owner, how come you've been able to create so much wealth, but we're still stuck? Many of them didn't necessarily have someone like you to create a software solution or systems or process that can really help scale a business. Why don't we do something? And I reflected on that and I'm like, okay, if I can make a difference on one entrepreneur's life and create so much wealth and so much employment. Company I was working for, when I walked in, they still about 200 people. In 3 years, we grew it to 1,400 people without any external capital or anything like that. Okay, it's just making the business very efficient and utilizing the margin and redeploying it back into the company. And if I can do that for one entrepreneur, what if I could do it for every other business owner? And that's where the inspiration of Deputy comes from. And that's why we call the company Deputy, because this product for Steve was his second in charge. Another name for second in charge is Deputy.
Which I love. That's awesome. Hey, so you jump out, you found a software company, start going. A giant success story now coming out of Australia. But when you would have first started, it would have been hard, right? There wasn't like a huge amount of success stories to follow, to base yourself on. Do you ever get any moments where you're sitting there going, wow, this is harder than I thought, going out and running a software company? Like any moments of doubt hit you in those early years?
We're two entrepreneurs over here. I think we can honestly both admit that it's a game of perpetual incompetency. Every single day, you're having to learn something new. I don't think it was ever easy. It's like playing any sport, okay, where you're up against a tough opponent and you're just getting smashed. And then when you win, the joy of winning just makes you so hungrier. You're going to go at it again. And then you get smacked again and just keep going. And whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So you just keep going. I often tell other entrepreneurs who reach out to me is that there's only one thing in this game. And that thing is to give up. Everything else is right.
That's the best thing now, even as we go and talk to other people and you talk about sales execution or you talk about onboarding, you go, wow, all this stuff we can talk about freely now. If I knew that 10 years ago, it would have been so much faster, but I didn't know. You learned it by doing, by making mistakes, by having things blow up in your face and going, okay, it blew up. Now I'm going to have to fix it and retread it and try something different. And that's part of the fun of going on the journey, right?
Absolutely. It's very few people in life get a ticket. Many of us as entrepreneurs do. There's 160 million people in Bangladesh. Only 2 or 3 people got a ticket like me in life to do what I was able to do. So there's not a moment that I'm not grateful for about what the opportunity I have been given. And at the very same time, I just have to do it. I have to do it. Failure is not an option.
A really good point there, Ashik. But you also threw in there about the small wins as you went on this journey, the analogy of sports. Did you have some of those big wins where you went, I think we've got this figured out. I think we're going to nail this. I think we're going to win this one. Not just the game, but the series.
There are. Look, almost all failures I had to some degree turned out to be a win. And matter of fact, I was actually telling this story last night and I tweeted, and somebody was asking me about this tweet on stage last night at a University of New South Wales Entrepreneurs Conference. And the tweet was that if I often get asked if I had my time again, what I would do differently. And my answer is that I would have started doing outbound sales a lot earlier. Okay, we actually did. We originally started Deputy. I'm an engineer. I'm an introvert. So sales and marketing is not in my DNA. Okay. But man, we're completely bootstrapped, no outside funding. We got to go make sale. All right. So once we had the product and you can use it, we had some customers, but we were getting customers just by asking the customer to introduce other customers, but we can't grow a business like that. So one day I decided here in Sydney, there's a place called Brighton Les Sands. If you know where that is, and there's a lot of restaurants, okay? A lot of great restaurants over there. One Tuesday morning when it's going to be really quiet, okay, Monday, some restaurants are open, Tuesdays, they're open. I'm like, I'm going to go door to door in every restaurant and try to sell deputy. So I did that, went to every restaurant and knocked on the door, the Desert Bird, the Middle Eastern restaurant, the seafood restaurant, everywhere. I tried to go sell deputy. Everybody liked it. Nobody bought it. Okay. So either I'm a really bad salesperson or the product is bad. Okay. One or the other. It's quite actually, I don't even know how to describe the feeling. It felt like a failure, to be honest, trying to do this. But then I'm like, I realized that, hey, no one's going to just go and roll out a software like Deputy, which is such a big change in the workplace. And everybody has to use Deputy. It's just not only one person using it. You have to get everybody to use it. Sell is not just going to work like that. So I needed to find a different way to get to the customer. While that was the failure, the win on the other side was, and it's funny that just before this, I was telling, I only met Sean once in the last 10 years, and that was in a XeroCon. Xero was obviously on the rise at that time, okay? And Xero didn't have a payroll solution. They bought this payroll software called PayCycle in Australia, which is a cloud payroll software. Okay? Back then, there wasn't many cloud payroll software at all. Okay. And I remember over a weekend, built the Deputy PayCycle integration. And I tweeted. Back then, I can just tweet for the company account. Now, if I wanted to do that, I have to get 50 people to permit it anyway. But hey, Deputy works with PayCycle. Okay, PayCycle retweeted that. Xero liked it. Rod Dury liked it, I think. And all of a sudden, you know what? Getting a lot of interest. All right. And it turned out, and if somebody uses Xero Payroll, which they rebranded as, there wasn't necessarily a good software that will do, and after you captured the time and how to do the award interpretation and pay the people correctly. And Deputy was an absolute lifesaver for bookkeepers and small business owner who was using Xero. To that point, we actually got a lot of, and I think in 2013 or 14, every second customer we got came from Xero. Okay. So while the outbound sales didn't work for me originally, like a partnership with Xero was really helpful. Yeah, channel. And then I was in every XeroCon, and I'm pretty sure Sean, you guys were too as well. I think in 2014, if I remember correctly, we did this stand where I had our common customer, Xero and Deputy common customer, Gelato, give us a Gelato stand. And then everybody came. Everybody came. It cost me $6,000 to get that Gelato stand. But I think I made $5 million out of that. Everybody came. They all wanted to line up for Gelato. And as they lined up, we just talked about Deputy. There's so many partners and customers we signed up from that time. I think they're still using it. So that was a really big win.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned a couple of things there, Ashik. They don't go hand in hand. You mentioned that you're an engineer, you're an introvert. We've been talking to a bunch of other people. They don't put themselves out there. They're not really present on social media, especially in this part of the world. It's the whole tall poppy syndrome. They don't see the value in it, but it sounded like you got into Twitter and LinkedIn quite early on. You were promoting it without really maybe not knowing it. Was there a strategy, or was it just simply to amplify what you were doing?
Deputy did not raise any funding till 2017. And basically 1 month's revenue will pay the wages for next month. Out of desperation, I'll do anything that I need to do. If I can get on LinkedIn and acquire one customer, I'll do LinkedIn all day long. If I get on Twitter and acquire one customer, I'll do that all day long. I'm not getting there to be arrogant or boast about myself in there. My single purpose is, and I tell this to every other entrepreneur, if you have a software or solution that can make someone's life better, you're committing a sin by not getting in the hands of those people. So do whatever you got to do.
Still can't figure out how to log into Twitter.
It's called X now. It's changed its name, mate.
Yeah, let me call you then. You might help.
Yeah.
Ashik, you mentioned you're committing a sin if you're not sharing, if it's something that you've got so powerful in your hand. But if you were to go on that journey all over again, what would you do differently?
So many different things. Look, there's a saying, 3 things are must in life: death, tax, and founder mistakes. And I just probably have so many of them. No, look, there's few things I can possibly definitely do differently, but all the mistakes I made ended up being a really good learning in terms of how quickly you can adjust. The key advice for everyone involved is to, even if you're making a mistake, don't make the mistake knowing that you're making a mistake, but don't stop. Okay. If you stop, startups are like, I think it's a Paul Graham quote, is that we're like sharks. If we stop swimming, we die. So you just got to keep moving. And sometimes you're going to go in the wrong place. But if you realize the wrong thing, just track back and go in the character direction in it.
So you're going to throw the word out, pivot. Like it's everyone's favorite word, pivot somewhere. You got to get as many buzzwords into podcasts as you can. I'm pretty sure it's a rule. For me as a CEO, I spent a huge amount of my time people focused, right, on culture and building. And if there's one thing I've always heard about Deputy, it's how amazing the culture is at Deputy. So, what was your secret sauce in building such an amazing culture?
If you try to set culture, you're going to fail at it. Okay, so don't try to set a culture in there. I don't think it works that way. And culture is a very funny word. It like a lot of different people interpret in a lot of different ways. For some people, it's the free food and the yoga and whatever. Okay, but ultimately, the way I looked at culture is the collective behavior of everybody that works in the company. And as CEO, one is responsible for basically two things: quality of the product and behavior of people. So the CEO is responsible for the culture, and it definitely comes from top down. And the way I try to lead it is I had to be the yardstick of culture myself. Okay, so what our values are, I needed to live it and demonstrate it. And also the people that are in the company how do I publicly endorse people living the great values? And often might be very unpopular, publicly crucify the people who break the values. And you need to do both. You need to do both, as counterintuitive it may sound. And that's what actually creates a really good culture, in my opinion. But at the very same time, it's one of those things you have to continuously invest. You cannot outsource this. You cannot make this the responsibility of the chief people officer or have a culture committee. That was a bad idea.
Not a piece of paper. That's right. It's not a piece of paper. It's not a document that you're like, hey, we're going to be truthful. We're going to be honest, like everyone's standard ones. That isn't culture. That's just words you're putting on a whiteboard, right? It's what you're doing and how you bring all these people together. And when you're small and you can, it's a lot easier to control the moving parts that make up culture. Because like I said, culture isn't just you or three people. It's the collective group of the entirety that works. So scale your business though, that becomes a lot tougher, right? How did you keep the essence of the culture that you wanted, that you're now living and that you're espousing? How did you keep that essence going as you scaled to have massive amounts of people employed?
What works for one company will not work for another one. I can tell you some of the mistakes that we made, personally made over here, that hopefully you can avoid. And one of the things that we got wrong is like we had a massive, big funding round in 2018. And obviously when an investor puts a lot of money into the company, you know what? You need to put that money into work. Okay. How do you put that money into work? You hire more people. Okay. And try to get those people to productivity. And a whole bunch of people might join you around that time. Okay. Because of, it's a cool company. I want to work for a cool company kind of thing in there. But they're not necessarily be a culture add or culture fit. And they're coming in for the wrong reasons. And you hire a lot of people very, very fast. And as you're executing this really, really fast, the quality of the decisions are low. The quality of the people you might be bringing on are not necessarily that good. A lot of people hiring friends, that kind of situation. And it has led to some disaster.
18 to 22 was an arms race, right? Everyone had lots of big funding rounds and it was, let's go really fast. And most of us were like, well, okay, growth. If you look at the spreadsheets and the numbers, it's pretty straightforward. Add 15 people and they're going to convert at this rate and you got this many dollars out. So let's add 50 people and it should. And so everyone went, sweet, let's get as many humans as we can into our companies. And 100%, like something at the slide. We were hiring hundreds of people at a time.
I think that's where investment bankers are wrong usually, mate.
We all did the same. We all raised money. We all did the exact same thing. Okay, numbers say this is how it works. Spreadsheet says this is the number of people we got to hire. So let's go hire. And we all hired. We hired hard.
And then you start to compromise values, right? You compromise one value as a leader, and then your subordinates will do another. And then before you know it, everything's washed up. And then going back to your culture point, it's all slipped away. And hence why the big disaster or tsunami takes place, right?
Yeah, but we were able to recover well, actually. There were a few things we got wrong, but we were able to actually recover and get it in a good place. And the other thing is that in some places I got it right and some places I got it wrong. Who do you hire as an executive? Okay. Usually, if you can get great executives who are very well aligned with you, then the organization underneath them will also be really well aligned with you as well. But if the executive is 1 or 2 degrees wrong, by the time you get to the individual contributors, it's probably 50 degrees wrong or 90 degrees wrong, going in the completely opposite direction in there. It's super important yeah, it's if I had to put down most of my mistakes over here where I got things wrong, and if I had my time again, I would do differently. Is who do I hire as executive? Is probably the one thing I could have done a lot better.
I always think there's two for me, right? We didn't start outbound early enough, and the second is it's people, right? I hired the wrong people in really senior roles, and then it took me way too long. I think everyone knows that about me. It took me way too long to move them on. I'm still that guy who's, I can fix this person, I can save him. And those two things, that people thing and the hiring wrong, like I said, it just gets, as it goes down that line, they become further away from what you want. And I think that trusting of your gut, especially after you do a big capital raise, trusting your gut and going, no, actually, I don't think that's the right person is really hard. You just raise a huge amount of money. These are really smart people you've brought into your business. And for me, it's the biggest lesson I learned is you just got to trust your gut. If you think that is not, it's not the right person, your body already knows. And you just think of a million reasons why you're wrong, and then you make a poor decision.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever get somebody who is perfect. But what I've actually realized, many people end up hiring because of what their experience or what the resume looks like or what logos they have. But the fundamental thing that many people ignore is that whether the person actually has a good heart and whether they're aligned with you. And that is, you can't go and say that, oh, I'm not hiring that person because I don't think they're well aligned with me, or I don't think they have a good heart. You can actually say that. And usually during an interview, everybody absolutely has their best behavior, and they hire the executive over here. The more polished they are, the harder to cut through that BS and see exactly who you really are. If I had my time again, I would definitely spend a lot more time getting to know the people before you hire. And by the way, you can have somebody who is a really great person, but they don't necessarily have that your company needs as their main core driver.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like just because, and it probably happens if you're a Formula One fan, you'll see this. Okay. There's a saying that someone is out of form and that's why they're driving very well. No, it's actually either you don't like the car or the car doesn't like you. It doesn't like your driving style. Okay. Daniel Ricciardo did so well in Red Bull and somewhat Renault, but in McLaren, he just couldn't pull it together. The car doesn't suit his driving style. It's quite similar to that of executives as well. Like, they might have done very well in that other company because of how that company runs, all the instruments that are available to them. But in your company, you might not have that. So just because they have done very well, it's not that they'll do very well over here. And even if they could, it's taking so much energy out of them, they're hating themselves as well.
They're not enjoying it.
Cultural alignment is important, right? Just because you've had success somewhere else is not necessarily going to translate into success at this new
place. Paul Bassett, the founder of ScorePeg, he actually had this saying is that hunger triumphs experience always. Okay. When I talked to him about it, he goes, no, actually, if you can't get hunger and experience, that's where magic happens. What I've realized is that it's actually not the hunger and the experience. It's actually the hunger as well as their intellectual horsepower to how fast they can learn and apply that learning.
And look, I'm a big believer. I agree, horsepower, the hunger to do it, but that's fit, right? Everyone's going on a journey, and every company's journey is different. And so you could have done it 5 times before, but if you can't fit into the journey the company's going on that you're going to join, you're not going to help it grow faster or better or smoother or anything else. It's that component. I think that's the bit where I doubted my gut sometimes. You're like, oh, this person's got all the ticks that you need, but I just don't feel something's missing. That's something missing is they're not going to fit your journey, and they're not going to go with you where you need it to go. So you're not going to get, for all their experience and hunger and drive and intellectual ability, they're not going to be able to apply it to the thing you're doing. And therefore you're both going to be frustrated. You're both going to look at each other going, this isn't working. And it just probably take you a year to figure that out, unfortunately.
Actually, I've realized over time, there's actually a really good analogy I've been able to come up with that has worked. If an executive is sitting on a chair or a stool with 4 legs, okay? Leg number 1, what do the direct reports of the executive think about their performance, okay? Leg number 2 is what do the peers of the executive think about the executive, okay? In terms of as a team, how we're performing. And leg number 3 is what are you as the CEO or founder, what are you observing? And number 4 is how well they are connected to the company mission themselves. Do they bleed the brand color of your company? All right. And I think that shows. Now, what can happen is that in that stool, you can lose 1 leg and still sit well. Okay. You can lose one of the 4 legs and it still will be fine. If you lose 2 legs, it becomes a little bit wobbly. If you're down to 1 or 0,
you're flat.
It's gone. Yeah.
From an executive perspective, it's really, how are they going? Are you waiting too long? You just need to measure the health of each of those legs to see that how that's going. And And ideally speaking, the executive themselves are actually taking a health check. If you're coming to them something and telling them that they didn't know, that should be a big warning sign already. Like that puts a self-awareness or the humility in big question.
Yeah, big red flag. Just to change up the gear here a little bit, Ashik, I found a journey can be quite lonely, especially in the early phase. And I think, as you and Sean touched on before, 10, 15 years ago, we just never had the momentum, the inertia, the tech scene in Australia, New Zealand. Who were you leaning on to get that early advice or, as a soundboard? Who were some of the people that you reached out to back then?
Look, I was very fortunate that I had my co-founder. He wasn't necessarily involved. Steve wasn't heavily involved in the business, but he had done another business, a very successful one from before. Definitely having him has made a massive difference. Howard Liebman, who is one of our board members, not necessarily from a founder perspective, but at least from corporate governance or network perspective, he had been really helpful. But out of the same cohort, Luke Anier is someone that I have a lot of respect for. Deputy and Safety Culture started. Actually, he started 10 years before, but he probably had a secondary coming of safety culture from what it was when he launched IORator. I don't think I got to read the book Hard Things About Hard Things till 26. And then I'm like, okay, now that's some real advice in that book. I quite often, actually, anytime I face the issue, there's a chapter in that book about what to do if you hit that problem in there. But no, I mean, it's great to see how much the ecosystem has evolved. And I feel quite fortunate that now I'm able to actually provide help and assistance to many other founders who are in the very early journey that I was about 10 years ago.
Hey, just on the flip side, when you do get so much advice given to you, how do you go, this is the milk and this is the cream or this is water? Like, how do you differentiate at that point in time that most of the stuff that's being fed to you is perhaps bullshit?
Ricky, I have no regret on bad decisions I made, but I definitely regret and blame myself for implementing the decision because somebody told me to do so. Like, I'll tell you this, it is so funny, and I actually feel even embarrassed sharing that, but I probably should share it so someone can learn from it. So I was hiring a very, very senior executive in the company and somebody who has a lifetime of experience more than I have. And I'm like, okay, this person is going to report to me. How do I manage them? So I asked this to a very experienced board member. And his overall advice was, with such an experienced person, you actually don't have to worry about managing them. They'll figure it out.
Oh, that's great advice. Oh. Look, it's funny because
I
I think we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah, I take full responsibility for that. And the damage that had done is unmeasurable, probably, to be honest.
It's that same thing. I think all founders and entrepreneurs coming up as you scale your business are going to get into this position where it's, hey, here's some really super senior person coming in and they've done this and they're amazing and it's going to be awesome and it's going to help you. And you're in safe hands now. This person's coming in. And it's not that easy, right? Because every business is different and it's your business and you know it really well. You need to be working with that person and guiding them and onboarding them and doing all that stuff. It's not as easy as people say. It's not a spreadsheet. And that's the difficulty.
Yeah. If I was to give myself the same advice, this is what I would have said. Okay. The right advice would be, look, you might not be an expert in what they do, but think of yourself being the food taster. Okay. You don't need to cook the fanciest meal, but you can definitely taste that whether the food tastes good or not. Okay. So improve your taste bud. Learn. Go talk to 10 other people in that role in other companies. Here's what I can introduce you to. Go talk to them. And what does great look like? Okay. And learn from that. So when this person is working for you, even though you don't necessarily understand all the different things that they're bringing to the table over here, at least you will know how to judge whether the work is good or not. The decisions they're making, whether that's good or not. If I give myself the same advice over here, I would go, yeah, here's 10 other people I can introduce you to. Go talk to them. Okay.
That's a great tip. Talking about tips and advice, as a founder, as a CEO in the early stage, especially they're sub 10 million, there's so much to do. Everything's going at fast pace. Everything's a priority. How do you distill that focus down to 2 or 3 things that truly matter? What was it that you did so well?
Look, there are some things that will come naturally to you as an individual, and there's some things will not. Like the thing that I always say, that you are who you are. Okay. You are who you are. And if you have to be somebody you are not, you're not going to enjoy that life. Okay. It's going to continuously drain the energy out of you. Okay. If you're having to be, even in a relationship, okay, if you have to be somebody you're not, you're going to you're going to hate yourself and hate the other person. And for me, as a CEO, there's certain things I was definitely not good at, but there's certain things that came really naturally to me. As an engineer, anything to do with product engineering design came very natural to me. Matter of fact, if I'm ever involved in any situation like that, I'm probably getting more energy by being in that meeting as opposed to draining energy. At the beginning, sales was hard for me, but then again, actually, I really started enjoying sales over time. I just realized I have to be with the right partner, number one. And number two is it's actually the customer. Actually, I'm really inspired by the customer and being customer focused. It's not about just one or two or three things. What's important as a company, there are different things you have to focus on at different times. When we're bootstrapped, every morning I woke up, the first thing I checked is the bank balance in Westpac. How much money do we have? I kid you not, for first 10 years before we raised funding, that's all I did. Okay, that was my number one focus. What's my cash on? When the investment came, okay, growth was the primary focus. The number one metric I used to follow is the conversion rate. Okay, conversion rate and NPS was two things. We're a product-led growth business. So how many of the people who are trialing, how they're converting? What is that conversion rate? That was, there's a whiteboard over here at home now, but at work where I used to sit, there's a whiteboard over there in the meeting room. And I'll publicly write that number down and I'll know that number by heart. Okay. And breakdown of each of the regions. So what we have to focus on. Once COVID happened, there's other things that became really important. Okay. I don't think you can ever focus on just one number. What time is it? Okay. What time is it? And focus on the number of that time.
That's a solid advice, right? Changes as to the different growth phase of the business. We've talked about culture, we've talked about funding, we've talked about a number of things. Obviously, your role changes as you progress. And then you get to a point where you are running a really big global business, a giant business. Part of your role becomes steering the ship and collaborating with the board. How did you strike that balance, Ashik? Because that's quite a difficult one. I'm perhaps talking from what I've seen with Sean. Like you've got to weigh that up. Is like, how much time do I spend with the team versus how much time do I need to give to the board? How did you come up with that equation and the balance?
Look, now I'm only on the board. I'm not the CEO of the company. And now the picture is a lot clearer from me on this side. And look, the funny thing is when I was watching the World Cup soccer in Qatar, and we obviously had a great World Cup here in Australia and New Zealand for the Women's World Cup, being a board member is like sitting in that area where the coach sits and you're yelling, do this. And there's this funny meme of the Australian coach doing that finger thing. I don't know.
I've seen that.
Well, do this. He's just like, finger. That's like, being a board member where you're actually not in the pitch, but it's important that you manage the board, but you're in the field. You better spend more time with your team than you spend time with the board. And from the board's perspective, okay, from the grandstand perspective, everything looks easy, okay, because you've got the full view of the field. But for the player, okay, they might not see what they're seeing from where they are. It's actually important to leverage the board about what they're seeing that what you are not seeing. But if you're spending all the time managing the board and not playing with the team in there, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. The fundamental kind of advice I got, not from a board member, I actually got from Jitu Patel, who is the SVP in Cisco, is performance equals freedom. If you're performing, you don't have to manage all the time with the board. But then again, you know what? You should leverage the board for what they're saying, what other games they're saying. Okay. It's best to have board members that are actually across lots of different companies, similar size companies, or probably in boards of companies that are 2 or 3 leagues ahead of you. So what they can tell you what's going to happen. Okay. And why a decision won't work. Okay. It's a bad decision. The advice I give is that if you spend way too much time managing the board, then you're probably not doing the job you're supposed to.
Around you that and we've been, I think you and us have both been lucky to have mostly good board members around us that do this. They're working at other companies or they're in boards of other bigger companies. So they're seeing trends and they can pass that down because that's aspirational. That's where you want to get to. They're in those seats and they're like, hey, these are things you should be looking at. If no sports team is successful if they change their tactics every 15 seconds. And exactly. That's where I think that's the difference for boards. Good boards are looking forward and going, hey, we're seeing some of this stuff. You should know. You should be aware of this, be ready for it. They should be holding you to account for your numbers because that's their 2 jobs. But if what they're doing is driving you to tactically change every quarter, hey, we haven't tried this yet, let's try this. Actually, it didn't work this quarter, let's try this. That's the distinction, right? Where I think it becomes a hindrance, not a help. And so that's the stuff that when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm like, that's where you watch out for. If you're in charge of the business, you're running it, you're on the pitch, you're seeing it. If it's wet and rainy, you know it's wet and rainy. They're watching it on TV. They can't see the rain. So they're saying, hey, it's all good. Like, why aren't you doing this? In ratings, so we're doing it a little bit differently. You actually have to have those discussions or they're not going to know. And if you can't build a relationship with the board where you can have those discussions, say, hey, guys, I know you can't see it on the TV, but it's freaking raining here. So we're pulling back a little bit while it's raining so that we've got the ability to launch from defense. The hard part, right? Build a good relationship with these people so you can have tough conversations. So otherwise, all you're going to do is change tactics every quarter.
Your rain reminded me of this funny story as well, where COVID had a massive impact on Deputy. Okay, 70% of our customer base is hospitality and retail, and with lockdowns, things and border closures, migrant workers not being in the countries over here, okay, we had a massive impact. Okay, there's probably some massive war stories in terms of the restructuring and other things as a company we had to do. And there's no textbook on this thing. Okay, by the way, for the record, there's no kind of you have to do whatever the best decision you can make at that point, and only reflect on, oh, didn't get that right, or got that right. Not doing anything would have been the wrong thing to do. But then again, during COVID, some companies were really growing. Okay, one around the digital space, they were doing very well, whereas we were not necessarily growing. And I remember somebody telling me, "Oh, they're growing so fast. Why aren't you growing that fast?" I'm like, my users are sitting in front of a computer and things. Okay?
Our users are locked down. They're not allowed to go on sites. They're not allowed to do anything.
Yeah. And if anything, it's raining really hard in our track. And if you try to do dry times in a dry tire, in a wet track, you end up in the wall and everything is totaled. Okay.
Right. I don't think it wasn't even raining. It was flooded. The pitch was flooded, right? It was a legit, it was Noah's Ark situation. Trying to call electricians who aren't allowed to leave their house. They can't go to work. So can't make money. Being like, hey, you should buy software. They're like, dude, I haven't worked in 3 months. Yeah, it was.
Hey, I don't want to grow the company. I put my freaking life into building the company. I want to grow, but I don't want to total it. Okay. Yeah. Don't be delusional and don't be greedy.
It is. And it's the same as the ethical part you talked about before. There's a right time and wrong time to do stuff, and trying to hard sell your product to people who can't make a living right now or grow their business or anything just didn't seem like the right thing for any of us to do. And I don't, like you said, there were 2 people in COVID. There was the software companies that scaled really fast because it was built for them. And then when COVID left, their companies no longer scaled like that and they're facing it. And then there was the rest of us whose people couldn't leave the house, couldn't get out, and we had to redundancy, all of those things. Like you said, there was no textbook. There was just lots and lots of hours of meetings and hard decisions and difficult conversations and all that stuff we had to do while keeping the lights on and making sure you generated as much as you could and supported your customers who are having the shittest times of their life too, and making sure you gave them as much support as you could during that period of time.
Yeah,
glad we're at it.
Absolutely.
Definitely rain. It was definitely a flood, not a rain. Definitely a flood.
Yeah. Hey, Ashik, now that you're on the other side of the fence, as a board member, what are you most excited about Deputy and the next phase of growth for the business?
Deputy had achieved some great success here in Australia. 1 out of 10 shift workers use Deputy. If you can achieve that level of growth in the United States, we'll be bigger than any other brands on the Southern Hemisphere. And that's the mandate. You guys sell in US as well. As you know, selling in the United States is a much different ball game than selling here in Australia or other parts of the world. There's a lot of on-the-ground relationship you have to build, partnerships, and I'm very excited about Sylvia leading that charge based in the United States. And the market is massive. The market is massive for Deputy. And it's a very sticky market once you get it. So yeah, the game is on. I speak to her every 2 weeks and we talk about a lot of different business things. And I'm really excited about what's going to unfold in there.
Awesome. It's great to hear. Hey, would love to take you through a quick fire round, Ashik. We ask all our guests these questions. They're easy. They'll come naturally to you. So
they're the best questions of the day.
Best question. So kick off with an easy one. Do you have a favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie of all time? Look, there's different movies that I can definitely resonate with, but I think the journey of an entrepreneurship, probably the closest movie to this is Lord of the Rings. Okay. An entrepreneur is Frodo, basically, in that perspective. Yeah. Okay? And there are times, and there's this great line in, I think Frodo goes at the end of Fellowship of the Ring, is that I wish the ring never came to me. I wish none of this ever happened. And he remembered this quote from Gandalf is that, so do all who wish to live such time. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you. Okay. And that's something that, I often reflect on whenever time gets hard in there. As CEO, often you will end up with the problems that will land on your table are the worst of the worst problem. If it could be solved by somebody else, it would have already been solved. So by definition, the problems you're facing are the worst of the worst ones in there. And some of them is like, how do I deal with this? Okay, how really do I deal with this in there? you wake up in the morning, supercharged to go make something awesome, and then all of a sudden you get hit with something like, oh, you got to just go and deal with this. You get better at it. Another one, and I often watch it. It's not a movie. There's this show called The Playbook in Netflix.
Yes.
Okay? That's my favorite.
Yeah.
There's
love that one.
not a single time I haven't watched it or rewatched it that I didn't feel inspired by it. So
Any particular episode?
Sorry?
Any particular episode of that one?
I'm very bad with names. There was the coach of the basketball team that was
Yes.
really good. Okay.
Yes.
And there was the lady who was the coach of the American female soccer team as well. Like, those two are really my favorite. That's a really good one. And two things that I often reflected is don't victimize yourself. Okay. Not an advice that I use for myself, but I quite often, like as CEO, you also have to be the organizational psychiatrist from time to time where people come up to you and I'm like, you stop victimizing yourself. You are one of the most fortunate people in the world to actually even be in the position you are. Okay. Don't victimize yourself. So that's one thing that is, and I actually get them to go watch play.
That's a good tip.
I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, definitely privilege. This is something we've all missed out on is time with kids, especially with the journey that you've had, Ashik. But now that you're enjoying more time with them, what's your favorite activity with them?
I'm going to just track back a little bit on this question because when everything is a priority, nothing's a priority. Okay. So I actually have a very strict discipline on my priority of my life. I often say that my number one priority is God. Number two is my family. And number three is work. So whilst I may have missed some things, but I actually have tried to maintain a really good life with my family. One thing I always did is every quarter after the board meeting, 2 weeks after the board meeting, I'll take a 1 week vacation, okay, with the family, and we'll go somewhere, absolutely brand new that we've never been. And the goal is that the memories we have, the experiences we have it together for the first time, because then that memory is a shared memory for all of us. And I think before COVID, I think 2019, we did Japan, we did Canada, we did the Great Barrier Reef. I've always tried to keep that as a rhythm. And I would 100% recommend this to any other entrepreneur is that you, the founder, you are the most important asset for your business. You, the business owner, the founder, the CEO, you're the most important asset for the business. So your sound mind, your mental well-being, your family is so much more important. So don't sacrifice that in the name of business, regardless of whatever you might be reading in social media, TikTok, or whatever you follow. I have a lot of admiration for people like Elon Musk or others, but you're not him. Okay, don't try to model your life after those kind of people. You really need to optimize your time for yourself and your family. So to answer your question, I'm having a lot of great time right now, actually. We got a trip coming up to Iceland very soon. This year we did Maldives at the beginning of the year.
Nice.
A whole lot of planning happening. And I really enjoy creating those memories.
Nice.
With my kids.
So happy to hear. So out of all the places that you have visited, Ashik, what's been your favorite? Do you have one?
I have many. And for different people, I'll give different advice. Actually, the advice I give to people who are scaling companies or building companies is that if you haven't been to Japan, you've got to go to Japan. Operational excellence. When I ask people, what's your definition of operational excellence? People give the Six Sigma, whatever, blah, 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 this corporate kind of buzzword answers and things. But you actually get to see what it means to have a society or a culture at its peak, okay?
Yeah.
And how operational excellence is so ingrained in there. And I realized what operational excellence is. Operational excellence is things that happen repeatedly, happens on time, happens on quality, and if ever there is a failure, it will only get better. So the primary example in Japan is their bullet train, okay? You get on the bullet train, it's going to be exactly on time. It's going to be clean. It's in quality. It's on time. And if there's even a 1 minute or 5 minute delay or something like that, the train conductor will come and apologize. There'll be an incident report and they will make sure that never happens again. That is operational excellence. And you know what? It's a great destination for family. I definitely have it in my bucket list to go back again. And I think as
on our list for next year, maybe.
Yeah.
Year after. We haven't decided yet. We're going to go skiing and take the kids, so it's on the list.
Don't go to Japan for skiing. Go there to experience Tokyo. Go to Japan to experience Kyoto. And maybe some skiing, but you want to go in summer and also see the cherry blossom.
Hey, this is the main one though, Ashik. This is the whole
This is the most
reason.
important question. Yeah.
This is the only reason this podcast was actually developed. It's for this question.
Okay.
Peanut butter. How do you like yours? Crunchy or smooth?
I'm going to disappoint you, Ricky. I actually don't even do peanut butter.
That's two.
That's two
in
today.
one day.
Oh my
What are you
God.
doing
Okay.
to us?
Hey,
You got to
we-
pick one.
We've tied you to a chair, and your survival depends on you eating peanut butter. But we're generous people, Ricky and I. So do you know what? We're going to kill you if you don't eat peanut butter. But which one do you want? Do you want the smooth one or the crunchy one?
Ooh, it's like it's a landmine question. I feel like
It is.
Isn't that right or wrong?
There's 100% a right or wrong. It's just,
I'm just think when is the last time I had peanut butter and what was great in there. I tell you what, smooth.
it's definitely the wrong answer. But at least you gave one.
On that note, it's been an absolute blast having you on the show, Ashik. Thank you once again for coming on.
So you
Thank-
appreciate it.
Thank you for having.